She felt the cowboy's hand close around her wrist. Just as the men from Denver stepped onto the platform, snow slammed against the station windows, while Naomi backed into the dark corner beside the freight crates, her breath shaking hard enough to fog the air between them. Zeke Mercer pulled his hat low, one hand resting near his holster, the other steady against her trembling fingers. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Easy now." And somehow that scared her more than the gunman outside. "If this story pulls you in, stay with us until the very end." The wind came hard through Red Hollow that night. It rolled down from the Wind River Range in long, angry whistles that rattled loose shutters and pushed snow through every crack in town. The mining camp looked half-buried already. Lanterns swung outside the saloon. Horses stamped in the frozen mud beside the hitching rail. Somewhere farther uphill, a drunk man laughed before coughing into the cold. Then the freight wagon arrived. Its wheels groaned as it pulled through the narrow street just before midnight, covered in snow from axle to canvas roof. The driver barely slowed. Nobody noticed the woman climbing down from the back. She hit the ground awkwardly, one hand catching the wagon wheel before she fell completely. Snow soaked the hem of her dark skirt at once. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and looked back down the road. Nothing, not yet. Still, her breathing stayed uneven. Naomi Reed carried only two things: a worn leather satchel hanging from her shoulder and a revolver tucked beneath her coat. Her fingers stayed wrapped around the grip, even after she realized the gun was useless. No bullets left. The wagon disappeared into the storm. For a moment, she simply stood there in the middle of Red Hollow while snow gathered on her shoulders. The town looked smaller than she expected. One muddy street, a blacksmith shop, a feed store with crooked windows, a church with no bell, and the saloon glowing amber against the dark. Music drifted faintly through the walls, piano keys, laughter, glass breaking. Naomi turned away from it immediately. Too many eyes inside, too many questions. She moved behind the buildings instead, boots crunching through deepening snow until she found the stable tucked behind the saloon. Warm air drifted from inside with the smell of hay, leather, and horses. The mule nearest the entrance lifted its head when she stepped in. "Easy there," she whispered automatically. Her voice sounded dry, worn out. She slid the stable door closed behind her and leaned against it for a second, eyes shut tight. The storm outside muffled everything now. Her hands trembled as she rubbed, feeling back into them. Then she heard the sound, a boot scraping wood. Naomi's eyes snapped open. A man sat farther inside the stable near a lantern hanging from a nail post. Big shoulders, heavy coat dusted with snow, dark beard shadowing most of his face. One gloved hand rested loosely on his knee while the other held a tin coffee cup. He had been watching her the whole time. Naomi reached beneath her coat instantly and pointed the revolver at him. The horses stirred nervously. The man didn't move, didn't even blink. His gray eyes dropped once toward the gun before returning to her face. "That thing loaded?" he asked quietly. Naomi said nothing. The lantern light flickered across her cheekbones and tired eyes. Snow melted slowly in the curls near her temples. She looked exhausted enough to fall where she stood, but the revolver never shook. The cowboy took another slow sip of coffee. "You planning on shooting me?" he asked. "Or just freezing to death in my stable?" "My mistake," she answered. Her voice carried traces of somewhere farther east, softer edges buried beneath caution. She lowered the gun half an inch but kept it ready. The man set his coffee cup aside and stood. Naomi stiffened immediately. Lord, he was tall. Not broad in the soft way town men got broad from whiskey and cards. This man looked carved out of rough country. Thick coat, work gloves, snow still clinging to his boots, a faded scar crossing the underside of his jaw. She knew at once what kind of man he was. The kind that spent more time around horses than people. "I ain't looking for trouble," he said. "Neither am I. But trouble's usually what shows up this late." A silence settled between them. Outside, the storm battered the town harder. Wind shoved against the stable walls until loose boards creaked. The cowboy glanced at her hands. They were trembling badly now, no matter how hard she tried hiding it. Without a word, he grabbed a wool blanket hanging over the stall rail and stepped closer. Naomi lifted the revolver again immediately. The man stopped. His expression never changed. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe here." Something in his tone caught her off guard. Not pity, not curiosity, just plain certainty. He tossed the blanket gently toward her, instead of approaching further. Naomi caught it awkwardly with one hand while still holding the gun. Warmth hit her fingers almost painfully. The cowboy moved back toward the lantern. "You got a name?" he asked. Naomi hesitated. Names could get people killed. Still lying felt harder suddenly with those gray eyes resting calmly on her. "Naomi," he nodded once. "Ezekiel Mercer." She recognized the name immediately. Most folks passing through Wyoming territory had heard of him one way or another. Zeke Mercer, the widowed rancher from Bitter Creek who barely came into town except for supplies. Folks said he lived alone up in the mountains with nothing but cattle, snow, and ghosts. Some claimed he once beat a horse thief unconscious with his bare hands. Others said he hadn't smiled since his wife died. Naomi pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "You always let strangers into your stable?" "No." "Then why tonight?" Zeke looked toward the storm outside. "Because nobody survives weather like this alone." Neither spoke again after that. The lantern burned low while wind screamed across Red Hollow. Naomi sat carefully atop a hay bale, still wearing her coat, revolver hidden in her lap beneath the blanket. Zeke remained near the lantern with his coffee, silent as old timber. At some point, her eyes closed despite herself. The last thing she remembered was hearing horses shifting softly in their stalls and the steady scrape of Zeke sharpening a knife against stone. Morning came pale and bitter cold. Naomi woke to voices outside, male voices, asking everybody in town. Said she's colored, traveling alone. Denver men, armed. Her eyes flew open. The stable door stood cracked slightly. Snowlight spilled through the opening. Zeke stood outside, speaking with Deputy Walter Finch beside two saddled horses. Naomi moved quietly toward the gap. Walter lowered his voice. "Road south's buried solid. Nobody leaving the territory till this storm clears. How many men? 2. Maybe more coming." Zeke glanced toward the stable. Naomi stepped back immediately. A second later, the door opened fully. Cold air rushed in around him. "She with you?" the deputy asked from outside. Zeke looked straight at Naomi. A long pause passed. Then he answered without turning around. "She is now." Walter studied him carefully before nodding once. "Then get her off the street before Boone's men start tearing this town apart." The deputy rode off into blowing snow. Naomi stared at Zeke. "You don't even know me." "No," he answered. "But somebody's hunting you." She tightened her grip on the